I'm here with Sheriff Rob Gordon and Chief of Police Rubenstein, having just a conversation about public safety issues here in Western Washington County. I want to ask a question now about a ballot measure that passed in 2008 that dealt with property crimes and increasing the penalties for basically burglars that are out there knocking in people's doors, kicking in people's doors, busting people's windows out, and stealing property out of their homes. It was ballot measure 57. We went to Salem after the voters voted for this, and significant numbers. It wasn't a close victory. It passed by a wide margin. And the legislature turned around and said, time out. We want to take a time out at Measure 57 and delay its implementation. And I didn't support that. I believe that the voters spoke. I happen to be a victim. My front door of my house was kicked in, and I understand what that does to a family, and I understand what it means to every night, make the circuit and make sure all the doors and windows are locked. But that delay of that particular measure, how does that impact public safety here in Western Washington County?
Well, I think the first thing that folks have to realize is the statistical reports that they hear are, in my opinion, very misleading. Measure 57, the predictions that the state was putting out as far as the numbers of increases in prison was hugely exaggerated. So actually our property crimes in total are manageable, but the people that are really hurting our community are the folks that are repetitive.
Right.
And that's exactly what Measure 57 is targeting, is the person who does 10, 15, 20, 100 burglaries. Those are the people that would get a slightly enhanced prison sentence with this measure. And I tell you, there's nothing better than stopping a burglary than keeping a burglar in prison.
Absolutely.
These habitual folks. So, it's a long story to explain in detail, but the short version is it really isn't going to put a substantial number more inmates in prison, but the few that are really hurting our community, it'll put those people in for a slightly longer time, and that's where we'll save a huge amount of money locally in property losses, in peace of mind as well, insurance costs, etc., and investigation costs, and forensic costs, and so on.
Talk a little bit about that investigation cost, or what that does to a small town, Hillsborough. What does it look like for you, Chief?
When you put one of those individuals away, what you're doing, it's not one person to one crime. We're talking about a select group of people that commit multiple crimes. And when we work those, they're fairly manpower intense. You've got to write a lot of reports, a lot of documentation. You put a lot of effort into it. They get into the system, and if they get released immediately, we get to go back out and recreate everything we've just done, except we're changing the names of the victims and the locations. Yeah. It happens over and over again. So when you can take somebody out that is what we call a group crime, a moving crime wave, those are the people that have the impact on us. We're not talking about somebody who does one burglary here. We're talking about somebody who does 8, 9, 10, 20 burglaries in a shot. We clear 8, 9, 10. You put them in and think, okay, we got time to breathe and do other stuff, and they're out again. They don't go out and do one more burglary. They do 8, 9, 10 more burglaries, and that's 8, 9, 10 more calls. That's the officers on the road going to the calls. That many more victims,
right.
That much more tracking of the stolen property, and all of the criminal justice impacts of putting them back in the system, back again. It's a repeat system, and all we're doing is being redundant and refeeding and respending the money. We're not saving money on our end at all.
Yeah, well, that's the frustration from my perspective. The idea that some in Salem thought, well, let's save some money by not keeping these guys locked up. I'm all for keeping these guys locked up and out of our friends and neighbors' living room, picking up their television and computer and jewelry.
I'm sort of smiling there because that's another misleading statistic. And so if the state says that we're going to release 100 people, they multiply that 100 by what their average cost per day is and tell you that that's what they're saving. In fact, that's not true, because those 100 are released from 14 different prisons.
Right.
So maybe 4, 5, 6 from any individual prison is released. And what I would save if I was the administrator of that is the cost of feeding those folks for a day. Maybe $3 or $4 a day.
Right.
The only way to save money in running a prison or a jail is to close a wing completely and lay off a bunch of staff. And that is not happening in Oregon. Not a single correctional officer in the state of Oregon lost their job or was laid off because of that legislative act.
Yeah.
So it's very misleading to tell the people we saved any money at all.
So we didn't save any money, and Oregonians are less safe.
And it's costing us in Washington County, our community, our local community, more
Money because you're reinvestigating these crimes over and over again as we have to continue to have this revolving door
and
effect.
they're in and out of our jail system, and we have to. So all of those things happen. Absolutely true. 100%.
Well, Sheriff, I appreciate your time this afternoon and visiting about these issues. I know they're important to you. And Chief, again, I thank you for your time. Let's work together to keep the bad guys in jail and away from our friends and our neighbors and our families.
Well, thank you for supporting public safety and law enforcement. It's invaluable to us. It helps us a lot.
You've been there for us, and we appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Appreciate it.